Hi, everybody. We're back today with another episode of Howie's Hometown Heroes, where we feature business owners, entrepreneurs, and community members who are doing extraordinary, amazing, unbelievable things right there in their own community and sometimes even around the world. Today, we're in Manhattan, New York, Big Apple, all that kind of good stuff, with a good friend, Jeffery Hoffman, who is a cannabis attorney and legalization activist. That's what the New York Times says about him. So who are we to argue with that? But let me tell you a little more about that, because one of the things that he has really talked about activists and making stuff happen is he has gotten tons of people out of jail. If you remember back in the olden days when cannabis was not the thing to do, or at least the government thought so, then putting people in jail for all kinds of crazy stuff that really didn't make much sense. I guess that's maybe me editorializing a little bit, but I hope that's the reality of what happened. But now he's gotten tons of people out of jail, gotten their convictions expunged, and really moving forward, get people's lives back together. He's also the attorney with the most cannabis licensed clients. Really an important thing to do to really promote that kind of business and helping people out all over the place. So Jeffrey, thanks for being here today. This is going to be a lot of fun.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So tell us like a fun fact about you, whether it's related to cannabis or other stuff.
Yeah. So I guess my favorite fun fact about me is that I've been getting high since Reagan.
Mm-hmm.
And I use that when I meet a lot of people. And I was at an event earlier this year. And after I used that line, an elderly gentleman comes over to me and he looks me in the face and he goes, Eisenhower.
Oh,
exactly like that.
Oh my God.
And I was like, bro, you got me beat by a mile. I'm not even gonna try to compete on him. It was unbelievable. And so we started high-fiving and everything after that. It was really funny.
That was funny. I would, the way you were describing it, I would have expected him to say me too. But Eisenhower, that's going way back. That's pretty funny.
That's it. He's the man.
Cool. Very cool. Very cool. Very cool. So tell me, how'd you get started in this? When did you go to law school? How'd you all kind of come about? Because legalization hasn't been around for a super long time, a couple of years.
Yeah, so I went to law school in the 90s. I graduated in 98, University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill.
Mm-hmm.
And for most of my career, while I was very concerned about cannabis-related issues, again, I've been getting high since Reagan and always thought the illegality of it was moronic.
Mm-hmm.
And the amount of damage that we've done to our society during my lifetime while it's been illegal has been unbelievable. I would put it at $1 trillion if a dime, specifically to Black and brown communities in our society. Really significant amount of damage. So I cared about these things a lot. As an individual, I tried to help. I did some things with expungement. There's a CLE. I think there's some video of me from 2013 talking about, Rhode Island was going to start talking about maybe expunging people's records. Maybe other states ought to think about this. But then finally, New York legalized in 21, right? In the middle of COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And I had actually had a business right before COVID that actually got destroyed by COVID, where I was one of the main food cart guys in the city. I was a partner in a business. We did the deal with Nathan's famous hot dogs, and with all the Egyptians that control a number of the spots in Manhattan, we kind of put that deal together. And
nice.
That's what we were doing before COVID.
Wow,
I really wasn't being an attorney. I was doing legal work for that company,
right.
But I wasn't, a full-time attorney. And then COVID destroyed that business, because in New York City, none of the people came back to the offices.
Right.
And that's the number one customer of all the food carts.
Right.
So New York finally legalized. And I actually remember the phone call. I was doing a phone call with my mom, and she was like, well, what are you going to, the hot dog company is gone. And what are you going to do now? And I was like, I'm not going to go back. I was a tech guy before that. I ran a software company for a little while. I'm not going to go back to the tech. I'm not going to go back to the hot dogs. New York is legalized. This is the two constants in my life since 1988, Mom, have been you and cannabis. That's it, right? So I'm going to do that, and we're going to see what happens. And my goal was that in that first year, and the first year of me doing it full time was 22. I decided this in late in 21 after they legalized. My goal was that I would get asked to speak at one event in 22 related to cannabis. And that first event was in April. And it turns out by the end of the year, I was asked to speak at dozens of events. And I mean, I've just got a really robust law practice now, and it's all cannabis. It's 100% cannabis, helping people get licenses. Like we said, helping people deal with the criminal issues, doing, genetics licensing deals, doing IP deals, everything you can imagine, everything any normal business needs related to the cannabis industry. That's what we're doing. Wow. So that's how we got into it.
Man, just like, we always like to say, when one door closes, another one opens. And
that's exactly how it works, my friend.
So I got to ask. So what'd your mom say when you said what you were going to do?
So I don't think any kids are pulling any surprises with their parents. I think most parents know who their kids are. I mean, I've told her for years, decades, that I'm a stoner, and she knows I followed the Dead for a while. So none of this is surprising to her. And she's always been very supportive of what I've done. So, I mean, now she's over the moon, right?
Yeah,
because,
sure.
I mean, for better or worse, I do seem to be one of the leading attorneys doing this in New York, and she loves it, right?
Yeah.
So it's pretty awesome.
Exactly. Very cool. Very cool. Very cool. Very cool. So what are those, besides, people being in jail or for probably a long time, right? Decades. In some cases, I bet. What?
It's all over the map. Some for a few years, some for decades. So it's just been very important. Some of what I've done, as you've noted, has been helping get folks out of jail. The big work that we're doing now, so especially in New York, there's pretty much nobody in jail anymore just for nonviolent cannabis offenses.
Okay.
State's done a pretty good job of clearing that up. But we got to clear up their records, right? All these folks still have a conviction on their record, and the low-level ones are automatically getting cleared. The higher level ones, you do have to do some filings in court. And in the conservative parts of the state, they're fighting it, right? And so we got a lot of work to do there. But that's what we're very actively doing right now. These are the things we really care about. We do the business side of it because we do like to pay rent and buy food. But what we really care about is, look, cannabis should have never been illegal. These people never should have been convicted of anything. Cannabis has been part of humanity as long as there has been humanity. It's only been in my lifetime, like these last 50 years of humanity, that it's been illegal, that this has been a problem, right? And as I said before, it's one of the dumbest things we've ever done. It's up there with Stalin, killing everybody and putting everybody in gulags. It really is, from my perspective. He destroyed Soviet Russian society, much in the same way we destroyed large swaths of our society by doing this. Really, really dumb. So it's incumbent on, I feel that, look, my dad was a doctor. I came from a family where I never wanted for anything. So I am morally obligated to now do these things, to help the members of our society that in my name, people that looked like me and in my name destroyed their families, right? In the name of criminal justice, right? Which was moronic. And so I just feel I and those like me are morally obligated to do these things, right?
Cool. So go back. Let's give a little history and context then. If this was not illegal till 20s or 30s, like when did that come about, and what was the background around that?
So I'm sorry, you want to talk historically about how it became illegal, or how we made it legal later?
No, how did it become illegal in the first place? Yeah.
So it became illegal in the early 20th century, gradually, as there became more and more racism against Black and brown folks in this country, right? It was very driven at particularly with Black folks. There was this whole thing of, and look, let's talk very bluntly about it.
Sure.
Your white women are going to start smoking the cannabis, and then they're going to want to, party with Black men, right? Literally, that was a huge part of it, right? And then another part is, a lot of the cannabis came from Mexico. So, particularly in the early part of the 20th century, there was this whole thing of, what's going on with Mexican immigration and all these folks coming across the border and bringing this demon weed with them. So how do you demonize them, and how do you turn the country against them in a very racist way? Similar to what you did with black men. You made white men afraid that black men were going to have white women smoking cannabis and doing whatever it is, that partying with them, and that the Mexicans were going to come across the border with this illegal product and poison your kids and poison your women and the whole thing, right? That was a huge component of it. So this unbelievably racist, sexist, it's not really sexist, but clearly there was a gender component of it, because that was what was driven. This is what's going to happen if you let this weed come into your society and be legal, right? So all of these racist elements really drove it towards society saying, yeah, let's make this all illegal. And then you got movies like Reefer Madness that didn't help, and the whole thing. And then it really went downhill with Nixon, right? Like Nixon really. And we had, specifically here in New York, we had very briefly the Rockefeller drug laws, where they might as well have executed you for cannabis.
Sure.
Right. I mean, it wasn't quite that bad, but it was close. So those are really the elements that really drove turning cannabis, which again had been part of humanity as long as there had been humanity. Before that, right? Wow. And then we just decided here for the last, they started, like I said, in the early 20th century, and then it really went crazy when Nixon was president.
All right. So that's pretty cool. So it's interesting how far back.
No, it wasn't cool at all. Goes. I know you're saying the background is cool to know, but it's cool. Let's just be clear, it wasn't cool at all. It wasn't
cool to be there. Right? That's what I mean. Yeah,
for sure.
I didn't mean to minimize it, for sure, but that's what I'm saying. Yeah, for sure. So you've had some people get out of jail, or what other things that you've helped people with. Can you give us some stories about people before, after? What are they doing now? So I'll give one story in particular. So there was a gentleman named Humberto Ramirez, and he was one of the Last Prisoner Project focused guys. So the Last Prisoner Project is a group that tries to put a spotlight on these non-violent cannabis offenders and does what it can to help. And they were certainly very supportive of Humberto's family, his wife, Brooke, but they just weren't getting anywhere. And then I met Brooke outside of, there's a big cannabis event here in New York City every year, and it happens a couple of other places, called MJ Unpacked. And it's at the Midtown Hilton on 6th Avenue, which happens to be the hotel that my parents and I stayed in. My dad was born in the Bronx, and while I didn't grow up in New York, he was in the military. When we would come back to New York to visit friends and family, the hotel that MJ Unpacked is in is the hotel we stayed in. Oh, there you go.
So, I was hallucinating. The hotel I stayed in when I was 8 years old is now the hotel that I'm in a cannabis conference at, right?
All comes around.
And so, it certainly does all come around. So I go outside, and this was, I think, May of 21. So I go outside of the event, outside the Midtown Hilton on 6th Avenue, and there is Brooke and a couple of her friends with some signs like, my husband is a nonviolent cannabis offender. He's in jail in New Jersey. Do any of you care? Basically, right? And so I walked over to her and I said, yes, I care. What can we do here? And she told me the story. And I said to her, we're going to get your husband out of jail. I promise you we're going to get your husband out of jail. And so I learned more about the case. And it turned out that the attorney general in New Jersey had issued a directive that the DAs all over the state are to re-sentence all of the nonviolent drug offenders as if there was no mandatory minimum. And
so what does that mean exactly?
So typically when you get sentenced, it's either for a number of years, and there may be a minimum number of amount of time you have to serve.
Oh, okay.
So my guy was arrested with a couple of pounds of cannabis in the trunk of his car, nonviolent, nothing else. And due to that, yes, his arrest and his conviction were before, or what's most important is his arrest. His arrest was before New Jersey legalized cannabis.
Right.
So yes, he does still have a crime, and they still could sentence him, but literally they sentenced him to a 2 to 7, which is 7 years with a minimum 2, a mandatory 2. That's the mandatory minimum.
Mhm.
His sentencing came after the good people of New Jersey voted to legalize cannabis. So his sentencing
Oh.
literally came in November of I think it was 21 or 20, whenever it was that they legalized. His sentencing literally came like a week or two after the people of New Jersey
Oh,
voted to legalize.
right.
So that doesn't help him, but it's just crazy, right?
Okay.
And so the DA had then, after he had served some of his time, had done this thing where let's re-sentence everybody without the mandatory minimum. Instead of doing a 2 to 7, my guy just gets a flat 7. And if he
Oh,
has a flat 7, he's probably out based on time served where we were at that time. So I go and find an attorney. I find one attorney that I'm talking to about this in New Jersey. It helps me think through it. And like, yeah, like our dude is out if the DA there wants to do this.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, what happened about this after the DA, or not the DA, the Attorney General said this, instead of having all of the localities do it on a locality by locality basis, they got a judge to come out of retirement to manage it. And the first thing that judge did after she came out of retirement is said, this is all great. The AG's memorandum does not have the effect of law, so I'm just not going to do it. The ACLU then sued her and won.
Mhm.
So then she begrudgingly started doing it. But the DAs one of the things that had to happen is the DAs in every part of the state had to put together the list of people that were eligible.
Oh.
And the DA where my guy was in Cape May just didn't do it. He said, screw this, I'm not doing it.
Just not doing it. Oh my goodness.
So we had Catholic. So I met this attorney that said, yeah, your dude, we decided between of us, our dude should be out. We then went and found another licensed attorney in New Jersey named Kathleen Redpath Diaz, or Kathleen Perez Redpath. I can't remember exactly how her name goes, but Redpath Diaz, I think, is her full name. But anyway, she's a rock star in New Jersey, and she went and had a talking with this DA down in Cape May and made it clear that unless he really wanted to get sanctioned and have big problems, he really needed to do this. And so he got the memo, as we like to say.
Mhm.
And so he did it and got our guy on a list.
Wow,
and
cool.
Got our guy, had a hearing, and we got him out.
Wow, awesome. And what's he doing now? And Brooke too. What are they doing now?
So Brooke is a nurse.
Uh-huh.
So we wanted to try to get him a cannabis license in New Jersey. And Brooke and I was like, you guys either got to move to New York or move to a more liberal part of New Jersey if you want to do this.
Mm.
And Brooke is like, well, no, and this and that, we're not going to do it. And then, there was all kinds of craziness about how they did the licenses. And I think where they live, they just gave the license to the mayor's brother or something. I mean, that's not exactly what, but I mean, that's basically what happened. So, I don't know exactly what they're going to do. I talked to them, come to New York and I'll do a license app with you and we'll get you a license. Right.
How long ago was that you got them out?
This was late last year.
Okay.
So Q3, Q4. So I met Brooke in May and Umberto was out by, I guess, his hearing was in September. And I guess he eventually got out. I don't remember what the date is that he got out. Maybe it was later in September.
Okay, so good couple of months really to make that happen. But it took a lot of work by a lot of people putting all those pieces together.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
And was some of that hesitation maybe still the racism and all the other stuff that goes back?
I mean, maybe on the part of I don't know if on the part of the DA it was racism. He just didn't like that cannabis is legal. So screw it. When I can slow walk or no walk, I'm going to do it. Right?
Jeez. Crazy how that works.
We're having the same problem now in New York. I mentioned with the conservative parts of the state that aren't doing expungement correctly.
Correctly?
So I've got
just ignoring it.
Yes.
Exactly. One thing I was going to ask, and maybe it's is another way to ask this, is there's differences between state laws, I'm assuming, right? and federal laws also. How
Yeah.
do you navigate that? And then you get different people in the same state allegedly following the same rules. All that, a lot of moving parts here, and nobody's agreeing.
Yeah, so
How do you manage that?
federally, yeah, so of course, cannabis is still federally illegal.
Yeah.
And what we are doing in these expungements are all for state crimes. You know, Biden did his little announcement, you know, about what they're doing, and that is really not helping anybody. And we don't have to unpack that unless you really want to.
Mhm.
But the stuff that we're doing is state crimes and on a state by state basis.
And that's so, and not just state by state, but even case by case, it sounds like.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, in New York, they've done some very broad things, but in other states, just depending on what they're doing, you know, there are places where we're having to do it case by case. There's not a broad remedy to deal with this.
Is that going to get leveled out in some way, or who knows?
Tell me tell me two things have to happen for that. The Republican Party has to get rid of the filibuster in the Senate, and then the Democrats will legalize cannabis whenever they're in control after the Republicans get rid of the filibuster.
Yeah, I think both sides are in the, yeah, that's a seesaw in a lot of different issues for sure. So
yeah,
going to see what happens. All right, terrific. So you mentioned, you know, people getting out of jail. Now I've heard stories, and maybe this is kind of related, that it's people with criminal backgrounds who get those cannabis licenses. Are they the ones who
that is only the card license?
So what does that mean? Okay.
So the first retail license they gave out is the conditional adult use retail dispensary license.
Oh.
And to be eligible for that license, you had to have a cannabis conviction in the state of New York, and you had to have operated a business profitably. Those are the two requirements, and that's only the very first retail license.
And then after, so that's like a regular dispensary that we would storefront that you would walk in and
correct.
Correct.
And the application period for those licenses has closed, and they're now in the process of giving out those licenses, and the first stores have opened.
Oh, okay. And now there are, so the two things, right? A cannabis conviction and run a successful business. Those two things, I mean, it's hard enough to run a successful business and then have, you know, the cannabis issue behind it is, you know, another.
They did get quite a few qualifying applications. It looks like not everybody that qualified is going to get a license.
It's licensed anyway. Okay. Oh, that sounds cool. Let's talk a little bit about the banking and finance stuff. So I know there were some rules about banks don't want to handle money that come through a cannabis business. How does that work?
So it's interesting. There are plenty of banks that do. The issue is, of course, since it's federally illegal and most banks get their charter from the federal government,
right?
They are reticent. That being said, there are plenty of banks that are, not the Chases and Bank of Americas of the world. You got to go down a few tiers on the size of the bank. And those big banks will not do it until it's federally legal, but there are definitely banks that will bank cannabis. It is more expensive and there's a lot of hoops to jump through, but it is definitely doable.
Oh, all right. That's good. I guess good to know for people who are going down that path. That's pretty good. So where do you see now moving forward this whole landscape of legalization in different, I'll say, levels or different, there was medical legalization for a while. Now it's opened up to everybody. Is there, what are futures? You know, where's the future in all this?
Psychedelics.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's a couple of states that have legalized psilocybin and other things. We had a bill in the legislature in New York that there's a lot of support for. I don't think the session is just now ending. So we're going to take a real hard run at it next session. I was hoping we would get something this session, but we didn't. But that's the next step, is especially for folks like our wounded warriors that have PTSD and other trauma. We got to get the psychedelics for them because they help tremendously. Tremendously.
Wow, that's very cool. Very cool. What do other countries do? I have no clue. other countries
Yeah.
where it's legal, not legal? What's the
So
background?
Canada, it's federally legal.
Mhm.
Uruguay is federally legal, but very limited as to what they're doing. Amsterdam or Netherlands, it's illegal but tolerated.
Oh.
There's a Dutch word, gedogen is the word in Dutch, and that means, well, this thing is not allowed, but I'm looking over here, I'm looking over there, and the thing is happening over there, and I can't see it, right? I'm looking over
Oh,
here, and I
interesting.
can't see this illegal thing that's happening, and so if I can't see it, it's still illegal, but I can't see it,
So I
right?
can't see it.
So the word for that in Dutch is gedogen, and that is what is going on in the Netherlands
It's
right now.
okay.
Yeah.
And other westernized countries, it's a mishmash, or
No, not so far.
not so
No,
oh,
nothing.
really?
Illegal. I mean,
It's still
Mexico is kind of talking about it and moving and like sort of maybe, and other places are talking about it. But yeah, the big three right now that are really doing it are Canada, United States, and Uruguay.
Well, very cool. Very cool. So we got the landscape is kind of I don't want to say a mishmash, but it really bits and pieces in different places. And
well, I mean, I think we're the big one, really. Let's face it. What we do, most of the rest of the world tends to do, right? And I do think you're going to see a lot of places in Europe, now that we've done this, start thinking about, I mean, there's been a lot of press about Germany and what they were going to do, and like everybody got excited, and then like we all know, it actually never moves as fast as anybody thinks it will, and the whole thing. But I do think you'll slowly but surely see other places do it.
Wow, very good, very good. And
I think another one that you'll see do it is Israel. Israel is probably at the forefront as far as the research about it and what's going on medically, but for whatever reason, it's probably because you've got a conservative government with Netanyahu. My guess is the next time they get a liberal government in there, they're going to legalize cannabis. That would be my guess.
How many states are like New York? New York sounds like it's pretty liberal now. So
yeah, so there's 20 something now. I think Delaware just did and Minnesota just did. It's 21, 22, 23 that have what we call adult use or recreational, and then I think it's like 38 or 39. I mean, I've quit paying attention to the exact number because it's most of the country, and the rest of you need to get with the program. Like, we shouldn't be counting how many are. We should be counting how many aren't.
How many aren't, and working.
But 3/4 of the country has some kind of cannabis legalized.
Okay.
So, like I said, once the Republicans get rid of the filibuster, the next time the Democrats are in control of the Congress, they're going to legalize. Pure and simple.
There you go. All right, terrific. Well, this has really been awesome and enlightening for me too. There's a lot of stuff here I didn't know about, and I'm always appreciative of you coming on the show and talking about it. Something that would have been really, I don't want to say unthought of, but certainly a difficult thing to have.
No, it would have been like, again, like I said, I've been getting high since Reagan.
Yeah.
If you would have told me in like 1991, and that wasn't Reagan, I started getting high in 88. So if you'd have told me in 88, like in 2023, you're going to be living in New York City, and the state of New York will have legalized, and oh, by the way, you're going to be one of, if not the leading lawyers leading the charge on this, I would have said, you're out of your mind. Like, whatever you're smoking, give me a hit of it, right? That's what I would have said.
There you go.
But here we are.
And here we are.
But here we are somehow. It's crazy, right?
All right. There you go.
Crazy.
Yeah. There you go. That's terrific. Well, this has really been great. I really appreciate you coming on the show, and everybody out there who, if you see anybody, you know anybody who is clearly as knowledgeable and passionate about what they do as Jeffrey is about cannabis and what he does, especially getting people out of jail. I think that is an awesome way to do that. Let me know, put their names or whatever in the comments below, and we'll get them on the show. So just so you know, it's money. Remember, whether it's your organization, your family, or your business, it's money that make those gears keep turning. Make sure your money is working for you in the most optimal way it can. And click on the link below for our interview. See you soon, Jeffrey. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you, sir. Have a good one.
You too.